What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the opinionated hippie, and this is part two, going backwards, of my reviewing and ranking the Rolling Stones studio albums. I already did the 90s and beyond. I'm now doing the 80s. This is the decade when the Stones kind of became like a corporate rock band. They became like a weird rock band in the 70s in which like they proved that you could like make a living out of being rock musicians, and that's just who they were. That like you look at them, that's their job. They're rock musicians. They're putting out albums regularly. They all sounded like the Stones. Some were great, some weren't. We get into the 80s, they sound like the Stones even when they're trying to like be modern or use technology or whatever they're trying to do. It just it's when they become something gets lost here. You can feel it's like a job. Hey, you got to put out an album, do your job. And as the decade goes on, we start to feel that. Little glimpses of like the early Stones coming back every once in a while. I don't hate this decade as much as I think a lot of people do. Um, uh, I think some of these albums are not that bad. Well, anyways, whatever. We'll find out when we get to them. Five of them go from five to one. I'll put the list on the screen, and then I'm going to combine 80s and 90s together when we're done, or the everything from the 80s on. I'll drop that list before the video's over. How do we get to hear from Zappa? It was not the easiest. I put it away. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards are mentioned in the Making a Freakout box set. There's like a 2-page list of names, and their names are in there. Plus, Frank was very kind to the Rolling Stones in interviews and stuff in the 60s. And he played them when he guest DJ'd. He paid Painted Black. I think 2 times we know of him guest DJing somewhere. He painted, yeah, I think he played Painted Black. At least one of those, maybe both. But anyways, that's it. Let's go on through these 5 albums, starting with number 5, which is this one. Number 5 in the 80s is Dirty Work. This came out in 86. It was their 18th studio album. If the cover alone is not reason enough to put this at the bottom of the list, then do covers even matter? It's a horrible cover. Those colors, is there anything more 80s than the covers of this album? Um, yeah. I don't think this is as bad an album as most people think. I actually think it starts off with 3 kind of good songs. Um, it's dated. There is an 80s production vibe to it. Apparently, Keith and Mick weren't getting along. It's not a very cohesive album, but I can't say it's horrible, though it is kind of bad at times. But I think the opening 3 songs, One Hit to the Body, which is kind of playing with production and kind of cheesy, and I don't know, I don't think that's a bad song. I liked it at the time. Um, if I did not buy this album, a friend of mine bought this album. I liked the opening song, and then I didn't buy the album after listening to it at his house. So the last actual Stones album I bought in real time was Undercover. This one I chose not to. I do like Fight. I do want the second song. I do one thing that the Stones I think do really well, and it's evident in these 80s and 90s, is they're really good at picking opening songs on albums, and the second song usually takes the momentum of the opening song and just runs with it. Like we get like an opening riff that carries that momentum, or some drum roll, something. They're really, really good at like sequencing albums, I think, especially like the first half of an album. And you get One Hit to the Body, which is this playful, kind of silly, all over the place. Nice squiggly guitar solo in there. That's kind of cool. We get Fight, which just takes that momentum of one hit and runs with it. And then we get Harlem Shuffle, which is a cover song, but I like this energy. I like when the Stones do something a little bit different. Harlem Shuffle, kind of a silly song, but it's fun. I don't know, it works. But then we get a couple ass songs that close out side A. Hold Back is like an okay rocker. We get a Keith song, Too Rude, which has some reggae in it. No, I'm not a fan of their reggae enhanced songs. We're really leaning into like the drum production in here with like some electronic drums and like weird like effects putting on them to give it this weird reggae steel drumish type effect that doesn't really work and sounds really dated, but there is something a little bit fun about it that I don't know, I kind of liked. Um, but it does sound kind of bad. Winning Ugly, I really like. It's a very 80s radio sounding song that kind of doesn't sound like the Stones. Um, but it's got a really great bass, some really great bass playing, really good synth work in it that's like cheesy 80s synth work. Um, I can't say it's a great Rolling Stone song, but Winning Ugly is not a bad little song. Um, Back to Zero is like a cheesy, kind of funky little groove on it. The title track is just like a tight Stones rocker. Had It With You is kind of eh. And then the closing song is like a nice, chill, mid tempo type of Keith song that's Sleep Tonight. That's not a bad song. There's a little hidden track, a little Key to the Highway hidden track buried at the end of Sleep Tonight. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's as bad as its reputation. It does sound a little dated, but I don't know. I think it's kind of fun, but number five easily, I would say in this era. But yeah, I'm not gonna bash it too badly. Number five, Dirty Work. Number four is Steel Wheels, one I've not listened to in decades. This came out in 1989. This is their 19th. Um, it just, I was surprised at how just straightforward and clean it sounded. I don't know if clean's the right word, but there's no real 80s tricks thrown in there. You get some genre experimentation. The song that I think if you read any review of this album, they mention Continental Drift and it's sort of arty experimentation. Sounds like somebody was listening to Peter Gabriel's 4/Security and was like, hey, let's do a Peter Gabriel inspired song. We'll bring in some like African instruments in the background, kind of lurking. We'll do a little drum breakdown, like Rhythm of the Night. No, Rhythm of the Night's another song. Um, it always gets praised. I think it's maybe one of the weaker songs on here, though that little drum break in the middle is kind of cool. It's an attempt to do something different, but that's the one song on here where I'm like, no, just stick with this kind of simple formula you got here with like some riffs, some rock energy, some hooks. I don't know. Not that bad of an album. And again, the opening sequence, the songs aren't the greatest, but the opening sad just starts off with a very strong sort of Rolling Stones type guitar riff. Then we go into Mixed Emotions, which kind of carries that energy in a good way. And then we have what I think is maybe the highlight of the album, Terrifying. Kind of just this upbeat. It's not necessarily rocking. It's a little bit of a cleaner kind of groove. Really good bass kind of driving this. The guitar solo is this nice, clean, but forceful type sound on it. There's like a marimba, I think, comes in at one point. There's this muted sax that works. Kind of a good song. And again, going to the whole thing, they know how to start their albums. Rocker, and something that's upbeat that keeps you involved. Not too different from the opening of the last album, though it just sounds better. Then we get like Hold On to Your Hat, kind of a song, though the riff that drives it is kind of cool. It's got this recurring sort of riff. Hearts for Sale, really nice, cool, like guitar lick that gets repeated. Song, it's okay. Blinded by Love is like acoustic, a little bit lighter. So a strong start, and even though it kind of gets just mediocre and blah by the second half of side A, or the last, songs 4 through 6, they don't sound horrible. They sound just like a band playing music. Side B or 7 through 12, you get Rockin' a Hard Place, which is a decent song. It was kind of a hit this time. Can't Be Seen, which is a very 80s sounding song. Keith sings it, and Keith's vocal delivery in this reminds me of War on Drugs. It sounds like the way Adam would like. I don't know his last name. I know it, but I don't want to mispronounce it. But it has reminds me of War on Drugs. It's like maybe Adam was a big fan on this. And like some of his more recent stuff, his delivery and his sort of underselling of lyrics reminds me of that. It Can't Be Seen. And it's kind of a good song. Almost Hear You Sigh, kind of a chiller song. It's got like some flamenco-esque type acoustic guitar playing. Doesn't do much for me. Continental Drift, I think, is overrated. Break the Spell's kind of bluesy. And the Slipping Away, the last song, is kind of Keith, is a Keith song. I don't think it's a great album, but nothing on here is really, truly bad. I think it sounds a little more honest and clean and just the band being the band than I think the last one I did. I believe this might be Bill Wyman's last album. This is the full one where he was a full time member of this and then he quits after this. Yeah, there's that. But anyways, not bad. I definitely think it's better than Dirty Work. But that would be my number 4, Steel Wheels. Number 3 is Undercover. This came out in '83. It's their 17th. The last Rolling Stones album I bought in real time. I actually have not bought any of the ones released after this, so it's the last one I actually purchased. Um, though I might have bought like earlier '60s stuff after this because I wasn't that deep into the Stones when I bought this. But I did like Undercover of the Night, the lead off track of this. It's silly, it's '80s, yeah, I think it's a good song. I still think it's fun. They're definitely trying some different things on this album, but I'm okay with it. And I still like listening to this. Again, the opening 3 songs, they know how to kick off an album. You got Undercover of the Night, which feels like an experience. You got all kinds of weird stuff going on and noises and fake endings and all this kind of stuff. And Mick overperforming and all this stuff. That goes into She Was Hot, which is just could have really nice, slick, tight Rolling Stones rock. This could have been on Tattoo You. Easily could have fit on that album. And then you get Tie You Up, The Pain of Love, which is like a little grittier version of Rolling Stones rock. Really good threesome to open the album. They do that well. Then you get Wanna Hold You, which is like an Keith song. Feel On Baby has a little bit of reggae tinge in it, but it's kind of laid back, kind of casual. It's got a loose, jammy vibe. I'm okay with this one. I kind of like this song. I still like this song. It's a good song. Uh, Too Much Blood, another awesome. Maybe doesn't sound like the Stones. Very dancey. We got some horns. We got a disco funky vibe going on. Um, uh, Mick does this crazy monologue, I guess you would call it, where he's just talking out about a bunch of stuff, and he name drops the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, talks about Officer and a Gentleman. Like, it's just this weird, random, indulgent '80s, like, throw everything in the mix and stir it up, and it's a fun song. And like, it's not that much different than stuff the Stones were doing in like late '70s, what they're doing on Tattoo You and Emotional Rescue, like this, which are the next 2 albums on this list in the '80s. This has a continuum of that. It's just produced in a different way and just has a slightly different vibe. Pretty Beat Up has a really feels like it came out of a jam session, akin to a couple things on the next 2 albums that I'm going to talk about. It just kind of feels loose and like, hey, jamming in the studio, let's turn this into a song type thing. Too Tough, the last 3 songs, Too Tough all the way down, and It Must Be Hell, kind of go back to a more grittier, typical kind of streamlined Rolling Stones rock sound. Like, I think it's a good album. I understand why people don't like it, but I like it. I think it's the Stones having fun. It's a little '80s indulgent at times, but it's also kind of just stripped down Rolling Stones when you need it to be. And like, the weird little things work. I think the weird little side 2 is a weird side of music. Actually, side 1 is too. There's a lot of weird little choices made on here, different genre mixes and Stones doing other things. But yeah, I don't know. I think it works. I like it. So yeah, it's my number 3, Undercover. Number 2 is Emotional Rescue, their 15th, right? This came out in 1980. Yeah, this would be number 2 for the title track alone. Not Keith's, Mick's falsetto in Emotional Rescue is one of the greatest things in the world. Absolutely love it. It's just a late '70s classic sounding perfect song. Um, and this one's another one that's, I think the Stones in the '70s, their albums are eclectic in all the right ways. Everything sounds like the Stones, but they got some dance energy, they got some reggae energy. It works on this album. Uh, every song just has a lot going for it, and I think they're bringing their best. The opening dance, part 1, is just this totally hedonistic dance rock type number. The bass is absolutely driving this. It's a hot dance mess, but it absolutely works. It is a fantastic song. Summer Romance, which follows, is this nice, upbeat, frantic, tight rocker. Nice balance between the two songs. And then the third song, again, they start off these albums great. Send It to Me. There's some little reggae energy in here, but they make it work this time. It's catchy. The song wins you over by the minute into it. Like I was resistant to it first. I'm not a fan of when they're dropping into reggae. Really not a fan of when he starts doing weird accents, Mick, which he doesn't do on this one. But yeah, I don't know. Again, starts off really strong. Each song has a little bit of a different flavor to it, but they all sound like the Stones. Let Me Go's a rocker. Indian Girl, some really dark lyrics about like genocide essentially, or I mean, it's just not a happy upbeat song, not a sexual song. Nobody's being sexualized in this song. But musically really good, some excellent bass playing, like Bill Wyman, all the love right there. But yeah, interesting little song that I think for Indian Girl, you expect a lot different lyrics from Mick Jagger or whoever wrote the lyrics to this one, but this one has kind of a meaning and a purpose, kind of a cool song. Where the Boys Go, midway through, opens up side two, probably the weakest point on this album. Down in the Hole has come some nice kind of swagger filled, slower blues vibe that a song called Down in the Hole deserves to have. Title form meets function really well here. It's kind of a slow, mournful blues. Jagger's really performing it, doing it really well. We get the title track, which is just mic drop classic. We get She's So Cold, which is just another just fantastic, just Stones classic song. It also feels like it's just a vibe. Like Mick was like, hey, I have this idea. She's so hot, she's so cold. Let's just do that for like 4 minutes and everybody just riff. All right, let's do it. Drop that. Yeah, it's a vibe. It's a feeling. It's a groove. And then we get kind of an laid back, all about you, sort of a kind of a laid back Keith mid tempo number that's actually pretty good. Yeah, great album. Fantastic album. Title track makes this almost a must own. It's fun. It's eclectic. They're doing a lot of different things. Yeah, I like this album. They started the 80s well. But yeah, I would put this as my number 2, Emotional Rescue. Next one also rhymes with those sounds because it's. And my number 1 in the 80s is Tattoo You. This came out in 81. It was their 16th. For an album that is essentially a bunch of outtakes from previous albums, I think going back as far as Goat Head Soup in like the early 70s, I think are the earliest tracks on here. A lot of Some Girls leftovers. It holds together really well, and it's a pretty fantastic album. Like if these are all their outtakes, man, whoo. Opens up again with another fantastic 3-1-2-3 punch. Start Me Up into Hang Fire. I mean, Start Me Up, the almost like the definitive Stones riff of one of many, but just that ba-na-na, like you're in it. And then Hang Fire just comes in with this really tight, like no frills Rolling Stones rock. And then they drop into Slave, which is a ridiculous beast of a song. Just swagger, slow groove, awesome backing vocals. Mick talking through the vocals. You have a sax that actually works on this thing. Not that the sax works, but I'm not a big fan of saxophone. Just a monster of a song. The original, when it was released, was like 5 minutes. I think in the re-releases, I don't know when, at some point, they expanded it to like the full almost 7-minute version of this. The long version is the better version. This is a groove. This is an awesome track. That's followed by a nice Keith rocker. She's my little rocky and roll, little TNA, nice little repetitive Keith rocker. Black Limousine is some nice blues energy. And then Neighbors, which is one of those songs you either love or hate because Jagger's yelling neighbors all the time can be kind of annoying, but I don't know, it kind of works. We listened to this album a lot when I was a kid because we had this pre-cable television. We had this thing called On TV in Los Angeles, which did like it was a paid subscription television thing. It was only on from like 4 to midnight, or after midnight it turned into other things. But the Stones did a simulcast concert and like for this tour. And I remember listening to this album. My mom got it. A bunch of friends came over. We had a party. It was one of the first I remember being blown away by that. It was a pretty good show. But we listen to this a lot. And the first side tends to be tighter, more rockier on this album. The second side's a little more ballady, but it still is really good. Opening on side A, on side B, Worried About You. Kind of an underappreciated little gem of Rolling Stones kind of slowerness. Kind of an unambitious but really sweet little number. Tops, probably the weakest part on here. Heaven kind of sounds like it's sort of the lighter, airier, not as I don't know if menacing is the right word, but not as dark version of Slave. Kind of a looser, freer, jammier type song to kind of mirror what Slave does on side A. Heaven kind of holds down the middle on side B with that kind of energy. No Use in Crying is another like kind of slower song. And then Waiting on a Friend, which might be one of the Stones' all-time great songs. So many memories of late at night watching MTV in its early years, and they dropped this video all the time, and they tended to drop it, it seemed, late at night. It was just like your perfect late night. Waiting on a Friend, just a perfect song. But yeah, Tattoo You. It's still just a fun, good, solid Rolling Stones album. The fact that it's all outtakes and stuff is pretty awesome. But yeah, that would be my number one, Tattoo You. And that is what they look like in written form, as I just described them in verbal form, whatever. But yeah, I would say you have 2 clearly on the bottom, 1 clearly in the middle, and then 2 clearly on the top. I can see why someone would put Emotional Rescue above Tattoo You. I could buy that, but for me, that's the order. This is where I would put all of them thus far. Tattoo You, Emotional Rescue, Undercover, those be in the top. I like Voodoo Lounge. I'm surprised at how much I've enjoyed Voodoo Lounge. It's a little long, but I think there's some really good tracks on that. Steel Wheels, just for its simplicity. A Bigger Bang, I was surprised at how much I liked. Dirty Work, I think, is better than those more recent ones. Hackney Diamonds, I'm still not completely sold on, though it does have a really good closing, or that penultimate track with Lady Gaga is a really good track. Bridges, and Blue and Lonesome. I received a comment from someone who likes this album, and I understand why someone would like this. I'm not a big fan of cover albums or blues covers albums in particular. I do think Mick Jagger does sound great on the album. I give him props, but it's just my personal least favorite. I have no interest in listening to that. But anyways, that's how I would rank them thus far through from the 80s on. All right, that's what I got. We'll do the 70s next, and then the 60s, in which the majority of their album, not the majority, but that was the decade they released more than anything, was the 60s. So anyways, all right, that's all I got. Let me know what your thoughts on these albums, all that kind of stuff. Subscribe, like, share, comment, and go listen to Tattoo You. It's just a really good rock and roll album, man. Rolling Stones, rock and roll. All right, peace. Talk to you later.